This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by Atlassian, the makers of Jira, Confluence, HipChat, and Bitbucket, helping teams everywhere team up to create what's next. Visit Atlassian.com to learn more. And by MacVoices Magazine, our free Flipboard magazine that brings you some of the best Mac, iPhone, and iPad productivity tips on the web. High in signal, low in noise, just like MacVoices, MacVoices Magazine includes information on how you can get more out of your Apple technology. Subscribe at macvoices.com/magazine or search for MacVoices Magazine on Flipboard. Welcome to Mac Voices. This is the Talk of the Mac community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we're getting dangerously close to wrapping up the road to Macstock as we head to Woodstock, Illinois in July for Macstock. This may or may not be the last show. If not, it's pretty close to one of the last Road to Macstock shows because we've talked to just about all the speakers, we've talked to the organizers, and now we're just ready to, well, some of us are getting on a plane, some are driving. I'm getting on a plane to come to Chicago to see some of these great folks and meet some new friends and just have fun. Have fun. This time, we have Mr. Matt Hillyer with us. He is going to be a speaker at Macstock, and he's also a first-time guest, I believe, on Mac Voices.
Yes.
Matt, it's great to have you.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Why is it taking us this long to get together? I don't know.
I don't know. I have no idea.
It's probably my fault. So what are you going to be talking to the crowd about at Macstock?
Well, a little bit of history about myself. I am a system architect at GE Healthcare. I work on digital imaging equipment, specifically systems that save and display medical images. And I do a lot of virtualization for testing and replicating customer labs, doing things like that so that we can reproduce issues in-house, write code to fix those issues, and then roll it out. So what I do is a lot of virtualization and a lot of lab testing, and I thought it would be neat to talk about some of the stuff that I've done with Macs and how I've used those as a platform for virtualization, as well as virtualizing some Mac environments for testing as well.
Now, just to make sure we're on the same page, you're talking about virtualization as in setting up virtual machines to run different versions of operating systems?
Yes.
That kind of thing?
Yes. Two things, right? So one, you can use the Mac OS, and then you can use things like VMware Fusion, I believe, for Mac, VM Workstation for Linux, and I think Windows is VM Workstation as well. And that's using a program on your computer to basically run an application or run the OS as an application on your computer. Then there's kind of a next step up, which is more enterprise level, and that's using a bare metal server, loading a very lightweight operating system on it, and then housing the guest OSs, is what they call it, onto this server, and basically accessing them remotely. I'll turn my notifications down here. And it's a very lightweight operating system. You can't really log into it directly, but you do it remotely. And you can actually do that on a Mac platform as well by loading ESXi, which is the virtualization platform for VMware. And I do believe Parallels, you can do it as well. And it's just a really lightweight OS that allows you to, to load guest OSs on it and do your job.
Virtualization is something that I think a lot of us are now aware of, but we may be just a little, not afraid of it, but just not quite sure how it applies to us. The classic thing, of course, is you have that one Windows program that needs the Windows environment to run, so you load it into the virtual machine, run that, and then keep it away from everything else. Are there other big benefits to virtualization from your standpoint as to what you do?
For what I do, there's a huge standpoint. For a personal use, really, like you said, it's for some one-offs. There's a game that's only out for Windows and you want to run it on your Mac, so you run it in a virtual machine. Or like there's a Quicken program, or there's a specific business program that you want to run, but they don't make it for Mac and you want to stay with Mac on your business. The same thing can be done with Windows. You want to run a Linux environment as well. You can't really virtualize Mac unless you're running it on Mac hardware, and that's another reason why I talk about using Mac hardware for hosting. But for my job, it's great for setting up lab environments, testing, where you have a solution for a customer, right? And we're talking 10, 15 servers, different products that all talk to each other. And to have to test that and test patches and test the interaction between those servers, it's really nice to have just a virtual lab that you can set up. The network is all controlled virtually. It's just basically a program that lives inside of a computer box somewhere, and it's 5 or 10 servers, and they're all working together. And the nice thing is you can pause them, start them. You can take what's called snapshots. So it's basically taking a picture of the computer system. So if you want to test a patch on it, you load the patch on it, you take a snapshot, you load the patch, and if it breaks it, you just roll back to your snapshot, and the system acts like nothing ever happened. So it's great for testing. It's great for training or just testing things out. Hey, I want to see what happens when I change these settings. Instead of modifying your production environment or your production computer, you can do it on this test system. And if you screw it up, you just roll back, and it's no big deal. And it's great for learning and, like I said, for training.
So do you think that we're all missing something from as end users by not looking more at virtualized environments?
I think virtualization is, in the last 10 years, it has really exploded on the enterprise level. But I think, too, even if you're a small business or even if you're a home user, say you want to, you have a desktop, you have an iMac, and you really want to play with the server, Mac server, and you really want to play with the email and the wiki system, but you don't have the money for another for more hardware. What you can do is you can load that in a virtual machine and load it in the background and just have it sit there just like a server would. You don't interact on a day-to-day basis. You get the system up and running and you leave it alone. And so you could do that to save some money. You just pay for the software or for the server package from the App Store, and that's it. And you don't have to get more hardware or anything else like that. Or if you're a small business, it's even great because you could virtualize some of your key production systems on a beefy desktop Mac or an iMac, and then periodically take backups of that. And instead of, if something happens, you have to restore the OS and then you have to restore your data on top of that. Well, with something like virtualization, you just take the latest snapshot, restart it, and you're back up and running, 10 minutes at most, and you can recover from a catastrophic event.
For the folks that aren't familiar with virtualization, the snapshots you're talking about are sort of akin to what we do when we clone a drive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, they're just basically the hard drive and the computer settings are two physical files within this host OS is what we call it. And it just basically clones those files and puts a time date stamp on it. And you can just say, I want to go back to there. And it just takes and it says, okay, instead of using the hard drive that you're right now, I'm going to point to this file for this hard drive, and you're off and running.
So there's a lot of familiar ground here. I think it's just a matter of getting people comfortable with the concept of virtualization, the idea that you're running all this stuff, but you're running it inside kind of containers on your Mac. So you're not really compromising security or much of anything as long as you know what you're doing.
It's great if you want to, do any kind of just playing around. Like you said, it's in a container. Whatever you do within this container stays within that container. If there are some like emails you get and you're going, well, these are fishy websites, but I'm not 100% sure, you could theoretically have a virtual machine that you go into that you kind of isolate away from everything else, and you can just go on the internet and check out these websites, and if they're fishy and they install something on your virtual machine, you just rewind it back to the last snapshot and all that data is gone, and it never migrated from your guest OS, from your virtual machine onto your physical machine. So it's pretty safe that way.
We don't want to go too far down this road because obviously then you end up doing the presentation here. But one last thing on virtualization. You said you can virtualize Mac environments on the Mac. So you're saying that I can have multiple versions of the OS or even just multiple instances of the OS running in different virtual machines?
Yeah, so there's kind of two ways to do it, right? So the first one is hey, I have a Mac laptop and I'm a developer and I want to develop a specific application, but I don't want to load all the developer tools on my primary computer. I want to have it kind of in a developer environment. So what I can do is I can download VMware Fusion, and then I can put in the CD, or just there's actually a wizard. It says, do you want to use the your maintenance drive, right? When you hold Option and you log in, it'll use that drive and it'll actually build a whole new, basically Mac in a window. And you can do all your testing in there. You can load up your developer tools or whatever. You can modify config files. And if you crash it, you're not, crashing your primary machine. That's one way. And the other way is if you have something bare metal like Parallels or ESXi, you can actually load, you can make a guest OS of Mac. And it does something in the operating system when it starts up that actually sees, is it running on Mac hardware? And if it's not, it won't load. So I have some HP servers at work, some DL360s and DL580s, and I tried it on there and it will not start up. It looks for some specific config file somewhere that only Macs have, and then it goes. There are some hacks supposedly for it. I've never gotten them to work. But if you load ESXi up on a Mac Mini 5.1, which is what I've used before, load ESXi on it, which is it's a VMware application or OS, and you can put the guest OS Lion, Snow Leopard, whatever you want on there, and it works just fine.
This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by Atlassian, the makers of Jira, Confluence, HipChat, and Bitbucket, helping teams everywhere team up to create what's next. Visit Atlassian.com to learn more. This time, I want to focus on Atlassian's collaboration and chat application, Confluence. To be competitive, you need to spend more time getting things done and less time figuring out what you need to do and who's going to do it. That's where Confluence comes in. Confluence gives you a place to organize your work, create documents, and discuss everything, all in one location. You don't have to deal with cryptic file names and dates, or even messier track changes. Put your comments in line or in any Confluence page and pin them. Centralize all that information that's scattered in other apps and email accounts. With Confluence, you can give every team, project, or department its own space to store their project files. Everything is nice, neat, and organized, remaining accessible to all your team members. And, as you would expect, Atlassian has a Confluence iOS app, so all those benefits and capabilities I just mentioned can be with you at all times, anywhere, so you can work when you want to and when you need to, all while staying synced with your desktop. And best of all, Confluence integrates with all the Atlassian products to create a productivity suite that is used and relied upon by many organizations whose names you might recognize. Names like NASA, Audi, and GoPro. You and your team can try Confluence free by visiting Atlassian.com right now and find out just how effective your team can be. That's Atlassian.com, the people who help teams everywhere team up to create what's next. Thanks to Atlassian for their support of Mac Voices. Yeah, I've had a little experience with virtualization, and I don't want to praise or condemn any products. Sometimes it has been so easy and simple that it's like, wow, this is fun, and there are other times that I can never get it working. It just becomes too much trouble, and after about 30 minutes, it's like, okay, this is not worth the trouble or the benefit, and you throw it away.
A lot of the products now are going more wizard-based, so pretty much they just come up and they say, what do you want to do? Do you want to load Mac, Windows, Linux? And you say whatever you want. For Linux, it'll actually go out and download the distribution you want. You choose from a drop-down. It sucks down, takes the ISO, builds the ISO, deploys it, asks you for a username and a password, and 5 minutes later, you've got a Unix machine already built. When Mac is going that way, and Windows is pretty much just, hey, put your CD in, give me your username and password you want to use, and then 20 minutes later you've got a Windows machine.
Brings up an interesting point. Do we have to have CD drives to install Windows?
No.
Okay.
Wherever you get an ISO or a DMG that has the files on it.
Okay, good. And I agree. I think the wizard-based things are great because that now makes it this playing with virtualization a lot more approachable to a lot of people instead of having to hire a systems engineer to get it up and running.
Exactly.
Make a few menu choices and you're up and running.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes this, I think, a great topic for Macstock. You were there last year.
Yes.
What prompted you to apply to be a speaker?
Well, I was actually on the staff last year. I was a helper. And I just kind of helped out, set up the everything. I actually live about, 15 minutes from the college, the community college that it's at. So it's right in the neighborhood. It's kind of cool that everybody's starting to do this now. And so I really wanted to help out last year when I found out about it. And at the end of it, I said, you know what? I think I want to present next year. I have some ideas for some talks. And so I talked to Barry about it, and I talked to Mike. We came up with the virtualization sounded like a good one. That's great.
I think it's going to be a really interesting conference this year. It's extended a little bit from last year into Sunday, so that gives more speaker slots. The diversity of topics is, I think, phenomenal. It's one of those where if in the unlikely event that something comes up that you're not interested in, you're only going to have to wait about 20 minutes or so before the next topic comes up. And
exactly.
I think that just, and if you're not going for a whole week where you can really dive deep, this is a great way to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm curious, with all the hardware and toys that you have to play with at the office, and it sounds like a lot, what kind of setup do you have personally? Are you Mac?
Well, I actually have the same computer I use at work I have at home. So I have, let me look at it now. I have a beefy, it's the Retina 15-inch, it's the early 2013 model, which is the 2.7 gigahertz, the i7, which is I think 8 cores, and it's 16 gigs of RAM. And I've actually used this when I went to Europe for work. I loaded a Sybase database server, a web application server, which was Windows. The Sybase was Red Hat Linux, and then a Windows 7 workstation, and then CentOS 3D reconstruction server that we use. And I had all 4 of those running on this laptop just fine. And I was able to reproduce customer issues real time, do some testing, modify some settings. So it's a real beefy setup that I use. They finally gave us the option to use Macs at work, so that's what I've been using there as well.
That's interesting. So is this a take your own machine kind of thing, or?
No, I have 2 machines. So I have a personal machine and I have a work machine, but they're exactly the same. They're the Retina 2013s.
Okay. How about in the iPad realm?
I do not have an iPad. I actually have a large form factor phone, but it's not an iPhone. It's actually a Nexus device.
Any particular? And you got to ask. It's always interesting about the way people make choices. Why the Nexus device?
A couple of years ago, I was interested. So I do I do a lot of software testing and development on the side. I'm not a huge developer. Like I'm teach myself Ruby and things like that. But I do a lot of testing and a lot of hardware. I play with hardware a lot. And a couple of years ago, I bought a Nexus device, and I kind of liked it. It was kind of neat. I just wanted to see what the Android experience was. And I went with Nexus because the Nexus device is from Google, and it's the pure Android. It doesn't have the TouchWiz on it like a Samsung does. It doesn't have any bloatware or any overlays on it. It's strictly Android. So I was able to do an Android and iOS comparison. And for a couple of years, I preferred iOS. But the last year or so, I kind of went back and forth, and I ended up staying with Nexus. The Android phones are just a little bit more customizable than the iOS phones. If I wanted to customize a sound, for example, I can download a program, or I can just download the sound directly off the internet, put it in a folder, and then just say, this is the sound I want to use. iOS, you have to kind of go through iTunes and put it, suck it down through iTunes and then assign it. It's a little bit more fidgety. But there's nothing really wrong with one or the other. The iOS has a better integration with my work email. It's a better experience overall. Whereas the Mobile Iron client for Android's kind of wonky. It's a couple of years old. They really haven't updated it. But overall, I just kind of like the customization of the Android device. I like the size and the feel of it. To be honest, really, you can go back and forth between the two, and you can kind of compare them, and they're about the same. They're about the same these days.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me the people that are primarily Mac and OS based, and you may not qualify for that because it sounds like you work in a lot of different worlds.
Yeah, well, I've been using Mac since 2007. When they went back to Intel is when I went back to using them. So way back when I had an Apple IIgs, gosh, back in '86, I think I had an Apple IIgs, and then a couple of years after that, I had a PowerBook, or I think it was a PowerBook like 650 or something, little trackball on it. Then I got in the military, and I was in the military for a couple of years. Then I got a PC. Then I got a laptop that was Windows. But since 2007, when I went back to Intel, is when I started going back to Mac, and I really like it. Lately, I haven't been too thrilled with it. I think that I'm really not a big fan of Windows either. It seems like Unix by itself, or Linux, I should say, like Ubuntu Linux, seems to be more what I prefer now. But there's nothing that runs on it. So, but I've been using Mac a lot, and I use it at work quite a bit.
Okay, I got to go down that path. What has been dissatisfying for you?
The OS, there's probably nothing wrong with it. I haven't dove into it because they keep changing it like every year. So by the time I start to get into the new features, they change it, and I haven't been following as closely as I used to. I used to watch all the announcements. I used to podcast on it as well. I kind of got away from all of that, and now I use my Mac more as a tool than. I don't use a lot of their apps. I use the Microsoft Office suite. I use a database access program called Razor SQL. I use OmniGraffle. So, the apps are good. It seems like the OS gets tighter and tighter. I'm not really a big fan of the sandboxing that they did a couple of years ago, where all the apps now have to ask permission to run, and they run in their little sandbox, and they can't really talk to each other too much. That kind of crippled a few things. And then I think like after 10.6, they changed some contact, like your contact address book, like the integration with that changed, and it broke a bunch of apps. So, I know that they keep changing things, and it's for the better, and it's for more security, but they're kind of taking away the power user portion of it, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's a debate we've had here. I think it's going to continue on and on, that trying to find that balance of power user versus average user who needs to be protected from things that they don't always understand.
Exactly.
And I think that's the way it's leaning, and frankly, it's probably the right decision.
Well, your largest base that you're selling to is that average user where they don't need all these power tools. They just want a computer they can get on and do what they want. I want to look at pictures or edit pictures. I want to surf the internet, and I just want to do it safely.
And I confess to some of that. After a while, it's fun to geek around with stuff, and it sounds like you do a lot of it. But when you have work to get done, I don't want to be geeking around. I want to get my work done. Exactly. And so I don't want to have to worry about a lot of those things. And that's the part of the OS I do mourn the loss of some of the flexibility, and certainly some of my favorite utilities have had to come off the App Store and go native simply because of the sandboxing, but still, a lot of compromises. Mm-hmm. Your bio is an interesting one, and I also want, before we get away, I wanted to make sure I touched on you. You just referenced it. You used to be a podcaster. I'm kind of in hiatus. I haven't said I officially stopped. So I did the Stealth Mac podcast. I did that for a couple of years, and I did that one. It was a video and audio. Tried to channel my inner Don McAllister, and God, he does fabulous work. You can't even get close. But I was basically using my personal Mac in a corporate environment, kind of stealthily, like not officially. Kind of wrote a guide. I had a couple of CEOs, hit me up. Hey, I heard you got your Mac to work. How do I get this to work? So I had security down my throat half the time. But I wrote, I kind of figured out how to get it to integrate with mail, with the Exchange server. I figured out how to get it to integrate with our chat servers, how to, get it to do our day-to-day business
that we did. And so I kind of wrote a guide on that. And as I was writing the guide, I kind of made podcasts as well. Here's the process I made to sync my calendar with Exchange. And here's the tool I had to use because we have old Exchange servers, things like that.
Are the episodes still online?
I don't think they are anymore. I'd have to search. And then I did a podcast with Lola Wong and Tom Perino called App Obsessed. And we did, about 20 episodes where we cost each other thousands of dollars in apps because we would talk about iOS apps. And we'd get on the conference chat or whatever, the conference call, and we'd record and we were like, hey, I found this app. And all of us were like, hey, that's cool. And so we'd buy it while we're talking. And we record that for a while, our reviews and everything. And that went pretty well, but then Lola got busy with school and Tom got busy with his career. It's kind of picked up a little bit. So we haven't done episodes in years.
Yeah, I think that is one of the pitfalls of podcasting with anyone but yourself. That somebody else says, "Hey, have you seen this?" and right away you're done. Exactly. And it gets really expensive when it starts.
I had to stop watching Don's videos for that reason because I kept buying every single software he talked about.
Yeah, he makes it seem so easy, and if you follow him along, it is easy, but it also requires a lot of time and effort to buy them and to learn them, no question. So where can folks find you online right now? Do you have an online presence at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter. My Twitter name is BLDNGNERD. It's supposed to be Balding Nerd, but everybody thinks it's Building Nerd. I'm on Facebook. It's public. I'm on Google+, but I never post there. Pretty much Twitter is what I'm on now, and I'm rarely on that. I've been so busy lately. I went to Europe a lot last year for work, and it just hasn't really calmed down since then. Yeah,
I know how that is. Well, I'll make sure I have links in the show notes to the social media presences so they can find you, and we will see you in Chicago for Macstock.
Sounds great.
Great. It's good to see you, Matt. Thanks so much. I hope this is not your last time to MacVoices.
Oh, I hope not.
Okay. All right.
Thanks.
We will make it happen.
All right.
Folks, I hope you will join us in Woodstock, Illinois for Macstock. I'll have links in the show notes, of course, to register. Time is getting short from a hotel standpoint, but as I understand it, there's still plenty of rooms left, maybe just not in the closest hotels. And of course, you can make flights right up to the end. So please join us. We're going to have a ball. We hope you'll be there. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes, links to subscribe, and to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo, SoundCloud, the MacVoices blog, the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter, and on MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard that helps you do more with your Apple tech. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com, bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.